The Legend of Tarzan. A big buff dude covered in baby oil who hangs out with apes and swings from vines must save Jane and his adopted family. And he hangs out with Samuel L. Jackson. That's pretty cool. Now this movie by far is the best live-action adaptation of Tarzan I've ever seen up on the big screen. And speaking of that, do you guys remember George of the Jungle? Kind of like the Tarzan knockoff? Let's all close our eyes and forget about that movie. Brendan Fraser? Okay, it's gone. It's gone. In this adaptation, the origin story is told with flashbacks, and we catch up with Tarzan after Tarzan has now been living in England and something calls him back to the jungle, where he teams up with Samuel L. Jackson to kick some ass. And what a pleasant surprise! I had no clue Samuel L. Jackson was even in this movie. And that's a tasty burger! And I gotta say, as far as entertainment value goes, Samuel L. Jackson is the most entertaining thing about this movie. He adds all the comedy, all the levity, and sometimes he goes a little bit too far because he's Samuel L. Jackson, but I liked it. And as much as I loved his character in this movie, every scene that his character's in, it just feels a little bit out of place. And listen, I mean that in a good way. I guess from some people's critical standpoint, you could say it was very out of place because at times this movie tries to take itself very serious, and then you cut to a scene with Samuel L. Jackson just doing what he does best, like complaining and talking shit about vines and talking about licking apes' nuts. Yeah, that happens in this movie. I loved it. The best way I can describe it and compare it to something is you take a movie like Batman Begins, a very serious, somber movie at times, and you interject Samuel L. Jackson into that movie, just saying his witty, quippy one-liners at times. Does that feel out of place? Absolutely. But is it enjoyable and entertaining to watch? Yes. And that was one of my biggest concerns going into this movie, because the trailers make it look all serious and somber and a little bit overly serious, and even the color grading, it's all grayed out. They suck and desaturate all the color out of it. And when watching the movie, I was pleasantly surprised because the movie has a lot more comedy and levity than I was expecting, and that's truly what made this movie fun to watch at times. And the movie also stars Alexander Skarsgård, who plays the badass Tarzan, who did a shit ton of crunches to play this role. And as far as his performance goes as Tarzan, I would say it was pretty spot on, because let's face it, Tarzan was never really that charismatic of a guy. He kind of just was a badass who talked to apes, and he swung on vines, and he had to kick a little ass along the way and give some stoic one-liners every once in a while. So he fulfilled the role. I don't really have any complaints, and he definitely looked the part. And the movie also stars the villainous Christoph Waltz, who plays a generic bad guy who wants money, blah, 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 blah. He's a coward. I'd like to introduce you to my good friend Django here. That's my Christoph Waltz impression. Anyway, as far as his character goes in this movie, like I just said, pretty much just a filler bad guy. I mean, Christoph Waltz's acting ability is great. He has a charismatic screen presence about him, but he was just written to be a generic bad guy who just does bad shit. And just on a quick side note, there's a scene towards the end of this film where there's a stampede of antelope and there's lions involved, and you see Samuel L. Jackson, and it sort of felt like a live-action Lion King movie. But for some odd reason, Samuel L. Jackson's just standing there too. Here are my final flicking thoughts on The Legend of Tarzan. As far as the Tarzan movie goes, I guess they did everything they could with the Tarzan movie. I really don't know what else you could do. But as far as the tone and consistency goes, it's a little bit all over the place. At times, it does feel like it's trying to be a little too serious for its own good, and at other times, it feels like a straight-up slapstick comedy. But if you're a hardcore Tarzan fan, or you just want to see some big muscular guy fight apes in the jungle, well, you're going to be entertained throughout the movie at times. And I also like Margot Robbie as the damsel in distress, Jane, who in this movie, she kind of fights back a little bit, but either way, she gets kidnapped, so technically, she is that damsel in distress throughout the entire movie. But as far as the overall movie goes, there's a few times where the movie gets a little bit tedious and repetitive. It has all these flashback sequences to showing young Tarzan, and at points you're just like, I don't really even care about that. Let's just keep going. So I'm going to give The Legend of Tarzan, a B-. It's a good Tarzan movie. If you like Tarzan, well, I don't know why you wouldn't like this movie. Alrighty guys, now here's my question to you, and let me know down below what you guys think about The Legend of Tarzan, or what's another good question I can ask you? Ooh, I got it. Okay, if you could pick one movie character as your sidekick on an action adventure, which movie character would you pick? And by the way, if you haven't already, make sure you check out my last video where I did an Independence Day 2 Resurgence movie review and some shitty Jeff Goldblum impressions. Thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. That way, I can see you next time.